Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in today. You're listening to a pre-recorded show of the Adam Messer Show, and I am your host, Adam Messer. I'm here today after about 45 minutes of technical difficulties. I'm here today with my good friend Winfield H. Strock III, aka Win Strock. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great. Doing great.
Oh man, thank you so much for being patient too, because y'all, I wanted to be able to record this because Win is not going to be able to do the show with me tomorrow, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to be able to talk to him about his new book, Red Sounding Resurrected. And so let me read the blurb here, everybody. Um, and you can check this out on valhallabooks.com, but it is Red Sounding. Terror knows no boundaries, especially when brothers must fight their own to survive. The crew of the K 389 cannot face the horrific, unnatural truth. Blood drained bodies, crewmates stricken with rabid madness, and shared dreams of redheaded woman all provide glaring clues. The longer the command seeks an orthodox explanation, the deeper the crew descends into chaos. Only when Mikhail Koryavin? I don't know.
Koryavin.
Koryavin, okay, there we go. Survives a vampire attack that he put the pieces together. He must recruit brave believers to save their ship. As the crew dwindles and the vampire's ranks swell, questions more dangerous arise. Oh man, I'm so tongue tied. Who accepts an invitation to join the undead? Who feasts on his brother in arms without remorse? What will they do with an with a submarine armed for Armageddon? And man, that is tell you what, when that is one heck of a story blurb. Basically everybody Red Sounding is like, what if Red October the movie met Dracula?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and so welcome to the show, Wen. Thank you very much for being here today.
Well, thanks, Adam. I'm pretty stoked.
So you just had a birthday too, didn't you?
Yep, turned 57.
Oh, happy birthday, man! Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So everybody, we if you haven't heard the story before, Wen and I met in like 2014, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It was at the GnomeCon 3. You were a guest there. You actually had the Red Sounding book. So this is like the 10th anniversary edition of the Red Sounding book. But you had your Red Sounding book, and I was there as a photojournalist taking pictures of the convention for the Savannah Morning News, and we met and we talked and we had a lot of fun. We hit it off and became friends, and here we are. 7 years later, we're working together, publishing your book.
Yeah, I think the thing that really kind of brought us together was both of us trying to find something that we're passionate about, something that transcends just having a regular 9 to 5 job.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I definitely. I feel like the creative side is something that always has to. It just always wants to come out, you know.
Yeah, and a lot of people, you hear the whole story about the starving artist, and I waited until I was in my 40s to start. So I took care of the starving part first by getting a career knocked out of the way, and then writing after that.
Mhm. And you were in the Navy, right?
Yeah, I was on submarines, and that's how the whole idea of putting a vampire on a sub came to be.
I think it's pretty cool because I remember when we first met, we were talking. You were saying that after you had retired, from your full career in the Navy, that you had a job, and we were talking about something. This is something that we had in common too, y'all. Wynn had a job working. I think it was like a night auditor at a
Yeah,
hotel, right?
yeah,
And I had a job as a night auditor at a hotel at one point, and um, you had you had your nightly duties or whatever, but a lot of time in between, if a guest came in or whatever, but a lot of times in between, you had time where you just had to actually be on premise, right?
yeah.
And there wasn't anything really that you had to do other than just be there and had all your work done, and that you had created like this. You started writing up your book or whatever, right? Um,
Yeah, well, a big part of that came from me just coming to the realization that during the whole 23 years that I was in the Navy, if somebody said, "Hey, who is Win Strock?" I would kind of reflect back on my career, and that was my answer for who I was. And then I go on to be this night desk clerk working for about $7 an hour. And I'm like, I can't reflect back on my current profession and really say that's all that I am. And I don't want to belittle the folks that work, the night desk clerk. I mean, I learned a lot about customer service, but the thing is I think we all need to realize that there isn't just one thing that we can look back on and say that's who I am. And you definitely don't want to point at what pays the bills and say that that's who you are, because it just kind of diminishes what we're possible, what we can be.
Yeah, I agree with you. The creative side of us is so much more than just one aspect or one, dimension, right? I think it's kind of neat how, we can be a lot of different things in our lives. Um, you're a father, your husband, you're an author, um, all these different things that you do. And that I think it can, like as kids, we're very creative, right? Um, and as we grow up and move into adulthood, we kind of had that, I want to say stamped out of us almost in a way, because you do have to go work, a job and, pay bills and whatever. And, um, I feel like, creating art, with writing or, whatever, uh, is a way to reconnect with that, youthful spirit and that free spirit of, sharing our gifts with the world.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And as you talk about what we were as children compared to what we are now, I feel like a lot of times society and civilization, they try to do a lot of things to curtail thoughts that go outside of the norm. They don't encourage people to think outside the box, despite saying that they do. And so you get to the point where you've hemmed in your own ideas to fit the narrative that the world wants you to speak to. And what you really need to do is re-engage that imagination, re-engage the idea that there aren't any limits or boundaries on what you can think about. And then, if it makes sense, throw it out there. And if it doesn't, take it back.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's really cool because, I think you made a really good point because there are people that will say that they encourage people to think outside of the box, but I've often encountered like in a formulated system, like I was not in the military, but you were, but in comparison to like a system that's already established, there have been times where I felt like a square peg trying to be forced into a round hole, and the people in the system tried to knock my corners off, repeatedly, and I just never fit, right? And and I'm not saying that I'm, rebel or anything like that. I'm not saying that. But when you have a person who is a thinker, a person who is, able to critically think and analyze, things outside of just do this thing, um often the people that are the just I just do enough to get by, they don't want you rocking the boat. They don't want you, coming up with creative new ways to make things better. They want to do, they want to have the same ham and cheese sandwich every day. They don't want you saying, "Hey guys, if we toasted the bread," they don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? And I think,
Yeah, yeah, I run into that at work a lot where I get the feeling sometimes that management doesn't want to entertain new ideas because that means that they need to actually do more work. So it might be an improvement overall of the process, but it won't be an improvement before they've managed to put in more hours or more concentration or more resources than they're willing to move. So they just pretty much want to sit tight and ride everything out until it's all over.
yeah, like a holding pattern. Um, I used to work. And this is part. Y'all, this is a conversation that I've had a couple different times, and I just want to share this with you. But creativity, like writing, for me helped me. Like in 2013 is when I started like doing photography and writing and stuff like that. And I met Win at this convention. And I was like, you can publish a book? What? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
You were the first author and a friend that I ever met, and Josh Vasquez, who I talk about all the time too. Um, had a really good influence helping me with it. But you were the first person I ever talked to about publishing a book, the process of publishing a book. Um, and it was something for me that I was at a point in my life where I think I was starting to get really stressed out from work, and there were a lot of changes going on in the industry that I worked in. There were a lot of things going on that were outside of my control, despite or in spite of, or whatever you want to say, of the work that I put in and the level of dedication that I had made to my career and my education. There were things that were outside of my control. I mean, like completely outside of my control. Not even in control, my boss, my manager, they were outside of his spec. These were industry changes that were happening that we could not stop or influence at all. And go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, I see something similar in a teacher friend of mine where, she keeps talking about all these different things that just kind of drive her nuts about the administration of teaching, the oversight in teaching, the micromanagement of teaching. And the more she talks about it, and I hear about how hard she works and how much time she puts in, and I'm like, you are passionate about teaching, but the public school system has basically pimped you out for your passion, and they're just wearing down your love for what you do.
Yeah, and that's another, example of a systemic issue, right? Um, and that's what happened with me. I got to the point where I was physically getting sick from the stress, and I turned to the creative side because I I needed something as an outlet. I needed something, to do that I could focus on that was outside. When you were talking about, like, for you it was like, well, your identity was your military career and being in the Navy, and then when you transitioned to civilian world, it was so much different, that it was almost frustrating, or I don't know what the exact word would be for you, but it was not the expectation that you had.
It
And
was unsatisfying,
yeah,
and
there you go.
one of the things that I remember saying to some guys when I was in the Navy, and we were putting in some weird hours, some long hours, and I said, if I was, making donuts or pressing widgets out in a in a factory, um, I wouldn't make the efforts that I make doing this because I believe in what we're doing, and so I'm willing to make these sacrifices.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that was something that I really felt like when we became friends, because I remember that it was like a 3-day weekend, wasn't it? Like a 3-day convention at that NomeCon.
Yeah, yeah, a lot
And
of great folks there.
yeah, and over the 3-day weekend, like, we would talk, and then I'd go around, take pictures, and I'd gravitate back, and then we'd talk some more, and I go around, take pictures, and I mean, like, I pulled, I think, like 16, 18-hour days those 3 days, that first convention. And um I just remember, us becoming friends, and then, like, afterwards, we would talk a little bit, but not we didn't talk too much. And then I saw you again the next year, and at a couple other conventions and all, and there, and um we just hit it off. You know what I mean? And I after that, I called you when I wanted to start the Savannah Quill convention, and I was like, "Hey, when?" I talked to you and Josh, and I was like, "Hey, I really want to start this convention up." And that was May 13th, 2016, y'all. So that was like 5+ years ago now. That was the convention, and then it was 2019. Remember, it was the summer of 2019 when I was like, "Hey, I've got this idea. I want to make an anthology. I want to publish this anthology with the Savannah Quill publishing thing,
Oh,
right?"
yeah, yeah.
And so, I was like, would you be interested in, doing a short story? And you were like, yes. You were like one of the first people to say yes. And and then we've worked together. We've done a bunch of different Meet the Author events. We've done different conventions. When Valhalla Books started up, you obviously you had a story in that first anthology we published, and then we were talking about, and y'all, this is kind of crazy, but a couple of years back, I had talked to Win about uh, publishing, publishing his stuff, and we were talking about publishing, and then I was just really happy. I know this sounds crazy, but for me personally, it was just a big deal to work with you and to publish Red Sounding with Valhalla Books, because this is something that we've been working on. This is something that we've been doing. And, so for me, man, it's just been a real honor to be able to work with you and to be able to, to get Red Sounding out. And I just love working with you, man. I just want to say that and tell everybody that.
Well, I enjoy working with you, and I think one of the big things that draws us together and gets us working lockstep the way we do is that we're passionate about wanting to do something like what we're working on. And when you have somebody that can share the same dream, then you can help hold each other up when things kind of take a turn for the worse.
I agree. I agree completely. I think that's a big thing.
And
And
I think that's what more people should do. I think more people in general should experiment with their artistic side, experiment with different creative efforts, and look for groups to join, look for literature to help sharpen your talents. And then, if you can find some people that can give you the encouragement that you need and you can be encouragement to them, then, you can get further with a team than you can by yourself.
yeah, yeah, you definitely can. I mean, I think that's another thing too with building, the Savannah Quill, then doing like the Books and Brews events and these Meet the Author events, and now with Valhalla Books Publishing, which if you can believe it or not, when in January will be 2 years old.
Wow, that's
I
the
know, right?
last couple of years have been kind of a fog for me in a lot of ways.
I know, and that's y'all. This is why I wanted to kind of piece together this thread because Valhalla Books is new as far as in name, but it is not new as far as like the work that I've been doing and the people that I've been working with, like Win and Josh. I mean, like this is like years in the making type thing, and we've been working on different projects, and like I'm always like, hey Win or hey Josh, I got this thing that I want to work on. Would you like to would you want to be in? And you're always like, yes, okay, yeah. So
Well, I just always
I
know
love
that
it.
you're going to pour a lot of passion into it, and I'm relatively confident that you're always going to have a project in mind that is in line with the kind of things that I enjoy doing. So when you ask, I'm my default answer is going to be yes because I'm pretty sure in the end I'm going to be pretty happy and pretty proud of what it is.
That's how I feel about you too, working with you, and the same thing with Josh, man. Like I kind of feel it's crazy, y'all, but and I keep it's so weird when I'm not I'm trying to talk to you and to the people listening too, but and it's one of those things where like I'm just trying to share stuff with them that you and I have already talked about, but at the same time I want them to know like we've had Win and I over the years we've had different chats about a lot of different things and there's been some times where he and I didn't see eye to eye on things, and we communicated, we worked it out. We thought, okay, what's the best thing for what we're doing?
But that's equally important. You don't just want
Yeah,
yes men. You don't want just people that are gonna worship the ideas that you have or whatever. I mean, I think that's what happened with the Star Wars prequels. I think George Lucas's ego was so big and his name was so big that nobody had the courage to tell him when Jar Jar Binks was garbage.
like the Emperor's New Clothes. You know, that remember that kids book, The Emperor's
Oh
New
yeah,
Clothes.
yeah.
That's what I kind of think of, and I like that because we're able to communicate and say, yeah, I don't know about that. Like I'm not really sure. I'm not. I mean, like I'm not sold on that idea. you know, or sometimes it's like, man, that's fire. That is like, let's run right now, full speed on it, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Some of the groups I've joined, you get different levels of constructive criticism from them, and the on the one end of the spectrum, you get people that just say that sucks, or they just say, I'm not interested in sci-fi, and you get nothing from that. And on the other end of the spectrum, you get people who will tell you, hey, your characters don't make sense to me, or their motivations don't make sense to me, or this
Yeah.
conversation seems totally disconnected from the scene that you're trying to portray. And so when you can get that on the end, that good constructive criticism, where somebody isn't telling you that it's awesome, they're not blowing smoke up your skirt or whatever you want to say, but they're actually telling you what they appreciate and what they think could be better. In the end, the criticism that they're giving you is to help make your work shine. And when they can do that, then you want to have the opportunity to do the same for them.
Yeah, yeah. And that kind of brings me into the next topic. You're a really strong author, right? A really strong writer. You're also a very good editor, and so you worked with John Stamp. And if y'all remember, John was on the show not too long ago talking about his new books, the Jackson Cole novel series with Shattered Circle and Acquisitor, which are now part of Ahala Books publishing.
Great guy, cool story.
Right. And you were the editor for his brand new book, The Acquisitor.
That
Um,
was really good. Sort of like a buddy cop drama with
yeah.
some supernatural stuff in there. I thought it was awesome.
So can you talk about that process and what it was like working with John? And I know, and let's preface it, y'all. Again, when Josh, John, Bobby Nash, and a couple of other people, we've all been friends, and we all have like this kind of continuity where we work together on things. Um, and so Win and John had been like done a couple of events together. With some of the events we did, y'all did like that literary love Savannah together.
Yeah, that
Um,
was weird, but also fun.
yeah, but this is the first time you had worked together on a book project, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So can you talk about that? And what was that like?
Yeah, so this was the second project that I edited for Valhalla Books, and as soon as I started reading it, I could tell that John's writing style kind of fit my reading preferences, which made it a lot easier to read than the previous work. And you just read through it, and whenever I would kind of trip up on something, I would make a note. And one of the things I try to tell people that I kind of learned early on is that the writer's got to do a lot of work so that the reader has to do as little as possible. You want to make your book more of a water slide instead of an obstacle course. But yeah, so I read through the whole thing, and then you're looking for little inconsistencies, you're looking for bigger inconsistencies, you're looking for grammatical, punctuation, all those kinds of things. One of the things that writers need to understand is a lot of times they'll just spit some stuff out on the page, and if somebody says, "Well, wait, what about all the punctuation and grammar and all this kind of stuff?" and they're like, "Oh, that's for the editor." It's not really, because
No, no,
what
no.
the editor what the editor should be doing is finding what you can't find on your own, not
Mhm.
finding what a fifth grader should be able to find, uh, you know, in an hour's time.
And I would like to address that topic because I'm still new with editing. I'm still new with publishing, um, but I am not new with writing and professionally writing and getting paid to write. I've been a journalist for the Savannah Morning News for the last 7 years, and I've also written other things for for pay. Been paid to do different work using standard formatting and grammar is important, and it is not the editor's job to meet the basic requirements for entry. It is not the editor's job to retype anything for you as a writer.
So my first novel, when it got picked up by Rebel Ink Press, and when I first got it back from the editor, the first pass on it, like in one of the first couple pages, she's like, "Hey, I see this one problem." She's like, "I'm going to identify the first five of those, and then you need to fix all the rest of them. Find them yourself because
Yeah.
it's some pretty simple stuff."
Oh yeah, like and we're not going to talk about anybody in particular, and I'm not going to name any names, but there was one project that worked on with a person that they did the same. They had the same error over and over and over again. Like I think when I did a quick search, it was like 150 times or something like that in this document. And I told them you need to correct this, and they did, and it wasn't that big of a deal, and that's fine. I mean, people are going to make mistakes or whatever. You got to do that, but I've had other people sometimes when I'll send like an article interview set of questions over that they'll send everything back in caps, and I'm like, I'm not, well, you could rewrite it. I'm not rewriting anything that you wrote at all. I'm not going to rewrite it. I might, correct some grammar errors, or I might correct, like some punctuation or like a verb tense or something like that, when I could tell you meant, whatever. But I'm not going to rewrite anything that you wrote. I'm not going to paraphrase it. I'm not going to change it. That is not my job to do that. And now, with the exception, I have done this for some elderly people that I've interviewed that maybe their technology wasn't like I've interviewed people in their 70s and 80s as well, right? And
Yeah,
so like I'm a little bit more understanding with them because they didn't grow up with computers, and the fact that they're using the computer to me is like above and beyond what they grew up and lived their whole life using mostly, right?
right, right.
So I'm a little bit more understanding with them. But I had one guy, man, he was in his 30s, and I was like, dude, this is garbage. I can't use this. I can't use your text messaging, language for an interview. And I could tell that he had replied back using this. I had one guy, man, one time that sent me like it was like 5,000 words when I had told him I had about 500 words copy space. He's like, "Well, you can just pick and choose what you want." I was like, "No, you don't understand. I'm not going to read 5,000 words to hone and craft out 500 words from you."
Well, that's like inviting somebody over for dinner, and when they show up, you're like, "Well, just pick out some stuff in the pantry, fix whatever you want."
Right, right. The kitchen's yours, all right? I'm like, and what really got me, I was talking to the guy, and he kind of got a little offended about it. I was like, look, man. I mean, I asked you to give me 2 to 3 sentences when I when I sent this over. 2 to 3 sentences is not 5,000 words for 7 questions, you know.
Well,
So
I've heard when I was looking for a job, looking for my second career, I had some advice on resumes, and they were talking about how um, people that are like hiring agencies look at your resume as like this they're looking for the first excuse to say no so they can just
yeah,
drop it from the giant pile, and the
yep.
same is true when you're trying to get published. Is there's zillions of people out there, they want to get their creative juices flowing, they want to get something out there, and if an editor, if a publisher has at the slightest clue that or the slightest opportunity to dismiss your work, they'll dismiss it.
And what's really interesting that you say that too is that is the different people that I've talked with who are editors or agents that look for potential stories to sell or whatever, that newer, and I guess not younger, but newer and kind of like less experienced publishers and editors uh, will spend more time and try to be more accommodating. But the professionals that I've met, and I'm at this point now too, and I wasn't like this at first, but I'm at this point now too where if someone doesn't submit using like the format that I asked them to use, or if they send me, like an unsolicited story pitch, I'm just I don't have the time to read it, and I don't have the time to go back and format and correct someone's um their manuscript like that. I mean, I don't have it's me and working with you and Josh and on some of these things, and it's there's no budget here. I mean, like I'm not getting paid to do the work, and I don't have the time to be able to do that. And a normal project like your project was very straightforward, and it didn't take very long because a lot of the stuff that I would have had to do, you were able to do with the formatting and stuff. And I was like, hey, this is what I want to use. And, you sent it to me already, pre-formatted. And then I think I did a little adjusting and I updated some of the stuff. And then you went back and, you were able to, that took very little time. Some of the other projects that I've worked on, they've, been 30 to 40 hours, not because of anything that the author did, but because of technology. And, so those projects, you're talking about, that's just on the front end before the first book is even sold. So when it goes back to working with someone on the editing side, if you've got someone who, they're really easy to work with, like John, Stamp, it just makes it so much better when, everybody's kind of working together on this, they creating the synergy on a book project, and that we all have the same thing in mind, that we want to bring the best story to our readers, right? Um, and I feel like that's an accomplishment in itself when we're able to do that.
Yeah, one of the things that I found kind of interesting when I was working with John was there were times where I would put a note in and say, "Hey, I don't think this really works. I think this needs to be done a little bit differently." And in some instances, he would come back and offer a degree of resistance. He's like, I thought about this, but I just don't really get it. And my response was, "Hey, if that sticks to your style, to your way of telling the story, and you see the value in it, I don't want to drain your voice from your own work."
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you on that. I feel like that is important too, to not challenge uh, something, but to be open to question. It's not like you're appealing to authority, or it's not like you're begging the question with it. It's more of like, well, this didn't make sense to me, kind of like when you said earlier, like like little tripping points or little obstacles or whatever. It's just stuff that kind of, like, I had one time an editor was talking with me about the dialect. They didn't like my dialect. I was like, well, i'm setting the I'm setting the characters in Savannah. They're from Savannah. This is a Savannah dialect. And I wouldn't want them to sound like they're from New York, you know. And
Yeah,
so,
those are tough, and I wrestle with that myself because if you go too far, then it can become illegible to somebody who's not familiar with the dialect. But if you go too weak, then you lose
it's just phony.
that local flavor.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think that's good. And that, I think that's a good sign too, when of a maturity with editing, because the goal is not to change the writer's voice, in my opinion. It's to help them be able to clarify story points or mechanics or anything that would distract the reader. And I tell you why I think that's so important, because I saw this librarian. She was talking about reading a book, and that she told readers, don't ever feel guilty for putting a book down or feel obligated to read a book all the way through that you don't like, or that is, difficult for you to read because it can't keep your attention. And she said it is the author or the writer's job to guide you through that story. And I thought about that.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, that makes perfect sense, because why should I put the work on the reader? Why should I be so obscure or so, sometimes asinine that, well, if you don't understand it, that's on you type thing. I don't want that. I want the reader, like, if I'm telling you a story, I want the reader to be able to follow along with it, and to not only follow along with it easily, but to enjoy it and be excited about it and feel like that they're part of the action.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. And one of the things that, another writer kinda taught me was looking into the lexical density of what you're writing, and there are apps online that you can use to kinda get an idea of what level grade reading you're kinda speaking to, and the goal isn't to try to if you're a college graduate, that doesn't mean you need to write college graduate level work, because then you're not necessarily going to appeal to a wider audience that can enjoy the story you're telling.
I agree completely. And I actually write to an eighth grade reading level. because I want people to be able to read it without having to overthink it or and there are times where I don't. I mean, like there are times where like I'll write on a collegiate level, but for the most part, I write and I try to speak. I try to speak the same way. Um, I've always felt like Ernest Hemingway, simple language, direct language, less is more with writing. Um, and it's not because I'm trying to dumb it down. I'm not trying to do that, but what I'm trying to do is be able to offer a story where somebody can, it's escapism, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they can get into the story without having to overthink it or without having to, read the first two or three books to get into the story. Um, or overcomplicating, a plot or, adding, too many different layers or, too many different characters or whatever. Um,
Yeah, and you don't want sentences that go on so long that you go beyond the subject of the sentence and a bit more, and then you're like, I kind of forgot what the beginning of this sentence was about.
and I've seen that sometimes with people and the way that they write, they'll have like two or three paragraphs about, something that doesn't really pertain to the plot at that moment. And that is jarring for me. That's like, what are they talking about? And then it won't come back up. Like, like that one rule of if there's a gun in Act One, it has to be shot and fired in Act Three or whatever.
Chekhov's gun, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it won't, it won't have a purpose. It's just a kind of like, just like putting icing on a, a brand muffin or something. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, and I've had instances where I'll write scenes that I just really love the scenes that I've written, and in the end, I find out that the story's taken a turn through development that makes that scene less meaningful or it doesn't fit, and I have a hard time letting them go until somebody else can tell me, say, "Hey, this doesn't belong." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's really cool," and they're like, "Yeah, but it's really cool that it doesn't matter." So don't take this detour just because you fell in love with the scene.
I love those little story goblins too because they'll just creep up while you're writing, and they don't really belong on set with the rest of the characters, but they sure want to be there.
Yeah, I've had some instances where characters, and until it happened to me, it sounded like something that happens to a crazy person, but it has to do with where you're writing a scene, and then as you're writing it, the characters say things you didn't expect. They do
Oh
things you
yeah.
didn't expect.
Oh yeah.
But I think one of the things that some people may miss is, we talk a lot about being passionate about writing or creating, and we talk a lot about how much we love doing it. But the key is you have to love doing something enough that even when it's hard and even when you possibly suck at it, you still keep at it and you try to improve.
I'll tell you one that I feel like is so important on what you just said, book sales, because people often will try to measure their success in writing and publishing on their book sales. And I don't feel like that is the best measure because a good story is a good story, whether people read it or don't read it, or they, if they know about it or they don't know about it. And the the example that I want to give here is Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist. In his 25th anniversary edition of his book, he talks about when he published the book that he only sold one copy in the first 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And then the second copy that he sold was to the same guy who went back and bought another copy of it or something like that. And that it was so, you know, I don't know how to say it, but it was so dismal.
Disheartening.
Yeah, it was so dismal that his publisher, let him go, but he believed in the story. He believed in the story. And like 10 years later, the story was out there, whatever. But 10 years later, um, I don't know who it was, but there was some famous person that was seen with a copy of the book in their hand, and like a little paparazzi type photo or something like that.
Yeah,
And then people started checking the book out, and then the Alchemist became one of the best selling books of all time. And
that's great.
it was 10 years that he was sitting on this book, And I say that because with the world that we live in, we are inundated with consumerism, commercialism, you name it. We're inundated day after day with social media and the algorithm vying to get our attention and all these different things. So I've seen people, and I'm not a best-selling author. I mean, like I'm definitely not a best-selling author, but I've seen people that they get discouraged because they're like, oh, well, it's kind of like this the Hollywood dream of, well, I'm going to be an author, I'm going to publish a book, I'm going to be famous, I'm going to be able to retire off the money I make off my books, and I'll just be able to be a full-time writer the rest of my life. And then when they find out that that is less than the 0.0001% of all the authors who are out there,
It's about like all those, those kids who think they're going to be the next Michael Jordan.
or when people say, "Oh, I can win the lottery." Well, yeah, you can win the lottery. I mean, that's a possibility. But what's the likelihood of whatever? So I've changed my philosophy of like what I want with, like don't get me wrong, I'd love to sell a million books. I would love that. I would love to be a full time author. Um, but I understand that it is not going to happen overnight, if it ever happens. First of all, but publishing, writing a good story is the first thing. Publishing, doing the very best that we can to publish these books and get them out there. Um, Having fun with it, doing the work and having fun with it. Those are connecting with the reader, and sharing a good story with the reader. You know that
Yeah,
that's all priority for me versus solely thinking about book sales. And are book sales part of it? Yes. Yes, they are. Like getting a new cover done or new design. Those are all things that I think about when we're trying to like the whole book packaging thing, right? But um being okay with not selling a million copies of a book, I know it's not going to happen like that, and I'm okay with like building it one brick at a time, you know.
yeah. But I mean, you could be like, say, the best baseball player ever to live, and if you aren't picked up by a professional team, if you decide you want to, you want to be your own, work outside the industry, then you're never going to see the kind of fame that those guys that are on those teams are. And I think in a lot of ways, what you and I are doing is we're starting our own league, if you will, and we don't have an industrial effort behind us with millions and millions of dollars and thousands of people.
Yeah, that's really incredible to
If
be
you
able to.
look at some of the people that are on YouTube, and you'll see them sing, you'll see them perform, and it made me realize, the people that you see coming producing things in Hollywood, it's not that they're that good. There are plenty of people that are as good or better, but it's that they are that well placed in your face in all various types of media that you think that's your choices, is this guy's movie or that guy's movie, and you don't realize that there are perfectly talented people right around the corner that can do just as good or better.
And I think of you made me think about an example when that I was listening to a video about voice acting, right? So you get these big productions, these animation productions and stuff. And if you notice, they'll always have like some big actor, for the voice talent most of the time, right?
Oh, now there's a guy, I don't know that anybody knows what this guy actually looks like, but he's done the voice of Batman for decades, and he's considered by many people to just be Batman.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm not talking about him as the rule, but where you have these folks that are already, they're already a big name and they already have an audience, So these companies, these big production companies like movies or whatever, it's like you said, it's not necessarily that they write a better story. You know, that there are people out there that might write a better story or whatever, but the companies, what they look at is like how many things can they sell, how many widgets can they sell or whatever, right? And so that's I think it's important to talk about that because then it's not, you know, as discouraging for people when they think, oh, I can't break into the industry or I can't do that or I can't do this or, you know, whatever. I mean, like having a good story idea is not the same thing as writing a good book. And then writing a good book is not the same thing as, you know, that book becoming renowned or it becoming you know, like a household name or anything like that, you know? Um so I kind of go back to, you know, write a good story, you know, share a good story.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think sometimes people miss when, like, you hear about some of the folks in Hollywood pushing for diversity of characters or character of a certain gender or of a certain ethnicity, and they push those things. And I'm not saying that those are bad necessarily, but they're bad if you do them for the wrong reasons. And I think ideally what you do is you just write the story, irrespective of who's going to fill that role in front of the camera. And if it's a good story, you can put anybody you want playing those parts. I think that Battlestar Galactica did a great job of some gender switches on some characters, and it fit, and it didn't detract from the story at all.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's good too. Like you know, one of the things that I like too is if you look at how Disney handled the Avengers story arc, you know, where they had different characters that they introduced and then they built the, you know, they built this Avengers team. I feel like that is the same thing with developing characters and building a story. You know, they don't all happen at one time, right? And
Yeah, and
you,
I was shocked that went as well as it did.
yeah, you know, it's one of those things where you know, they give you a, you know, a nice little sample and you know, you've got an individual movie, you know, like with Iron Man or with Thor or Captain America or you know, some of the different ones that they've done, you know, where they incorporated those and then you had like the Avengers and then you had, you know, where each where they would offset the Avengers movies with an individual, you know, movie, right? Um, and then you'd have like, you know, the sequence of different movies, like, okay, well, this is where the storyline progresses to the next thing and the next. So you have all these different characters that are building into this universe. So they were creating this world for people to be able to believe and to, you know, to follow and check out, which had been established for many, many years, right? But had
Yeah,
never been
yeah.
established in the movie world, right? So I feel like the way that Disney did with their storytelling with the Avengers is a great example of how you can take and pretty much Sony didn't want those characters, right? They kept the more popular characters when they did their movie deal, you know, and then Marvel, you know, Disney bought Marvel out and they had these other characters which were not like, you know, I mean they were the Avengers characters and stuff were really popular in the 60s and 70s, but not so much in the 80s and 90s and stuff like that. It's only been like the last since the Marvel movies that these Avenger characters have become like really, really incredibly interesting for people. And now they're going to start bringing in, you know, some of these other characters that, you know, that Sony had the rights to or whatever. But if you look at the storytelling device that they have, I feel like Disney could be like, here's a stick, and we're going to make you fall in love with this stick story.
I think they succeed in some areas, and I think that they fail in other areas.
Oh yeah, definitely. But you know, I feel like it's good with the way that they do their storytelling, and some stuff is different, you know. But overall, yeah, the storytelling I feel like is important, right? Let me ask you with this red sounding, coming back around with the 10th anniversary. You know, speaking of storytelling or whatever, um, what was it like going through that process working with me? and Valhalla Books and doing that. I mean, could you share like your vantage point of what it was like for the audience?
Wow, I don't really know that there's a whole lot to tell because I mean, we talked about the deal, we talked about trying to get this book out, and you and I would bounce some ideas off of each other, and one way or another, it seemed like we always tended to fall this way or that on it, and so I think it worked out pretty smooth. I mean, it's a lot smoother than the original Red Sounding when I put it out in 2011 because I had to work with that guy a lot, and it was a little rough. And I think part of it was because he was a little OCD, and part of it was I just maybe I just wasn't effective in communicating on a level that he could understand. But it was a lot of effort, and this time it was so simple and so smooth that I was kind of shocked by it.
I was really happy with the process too. You know, I feel like that's a testament to like our friendship, and then also, you know, the different projects that we've worked on in the past. We kind of already have an idea of how each other works, and you know what, yeah, because we both work, and we a lot of times like today we're recording this show on a Saturday afternoon. You know, so
Oh, and that guy Jeff, the cover artist, did a great job.
oh yeah, Jeffrey Ray Hayes. Yeah, he did a wonderful job. I love how he recreated that cover from your descriptions. Like he created a new cover based off of your descriptions of the characters and all.
Yeah, we had a couple good conversations about elements of the story, elements of the characters. What was weird was I came to realize that in a way there were sort of like mirror images of uh, the protagonist versus the antagonist, and the protagonist's love interest and the antagonist's number one accomplice.
Mm. You know what I thought too was really cool about the cover design was the hat that the vampire was wearing.
Oh, that was an interesting coincidence because I don't remember saying anything to him about that hat, and it ends up being on there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I actually own one of those. When I put the original version of it out, I'd actually made uh, my own costume of the captain of the submarine from buying old Soviet uniform materials.
What kind of hat was it? Do you remember? What was?
I don't know what you call it.
Yeah.
When I was in the Navy, we wore similar caps, and we called them garrison caps,
Okay.
and they just kind of fold up. They're sort of a flimsy piece of cloth, and then of course they have an emblem on the front there with the red hammer and sickle.
You know, when I was talking to Jeffrey about it, Jeff, he said that he was trying to pick out a hat that would, be a good fit for that submarine. Um, and I just thought it was such a crazy coincidence. Like it was meant to be. You know what I mean? Um, and the way that he depicted the vampire, the way he had the redheaded lady, and all of that, and the way that he even did like this promo video, y'all. I mean, it like turned out really
Oh yeah,
great.
that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was way better than anything that I expected. I mean, like he does really good work, but I was blown away when I first saw it. I was like, what? I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, it was good stuff. Um, I was fascinated. Speaking of the costume I put together, I was fascinated by the history of the people of the Soviet Union. I mean, I spent my whole career, or the majority of my career, in the Cold War and seeing those people as the enemy. But as I did the research for Red Sounding, I started seeing the people that are in that enemy nation as people, and I started looking at some of the things that they had to endure, starting with the World War II, and then just the depravity, deprivation that came thereafter.
Yeah, I think that was pretty cool too. The way that you talked about it and the updated author notes about it as well.
Yeah, I enjoyed the research, and then when I would go to conventions and talk to folks about some of the things I found in the research, it just seemed natural to put it in there.
Very cool. Well, Wen, thanks a lot, man, for doing this today with me, and I'm
Oh, happy to
excited.
do it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about your red sounding book being out there in the world today for people to be able to enjoy. And I love the fact that we're working together with Valhalla Books, that you're publishing with Valhalla Books now. So thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy working with it. Enjoy hanging out with you. We're going to hang out real soon. All right, up in Rincon.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm glad you said something. I forgot to talk about that, but yeah, we're going to be doing the Empire Comic Con, and it is in Rincon, Georgia, on October the 23rd. So we'll be out there. Hugo Soto and is hosting that. There's going to be a bunch of comics and uh, toy dealers and stuff like that, from what I understand. And we're going to be out there with our books and some authors. And yeah, it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be my first time out of the hermit cave, first time in a convention since before the pandemic. So I'm going to have to get a haircut and stuff.
Oh man, that's awesome. So.